Noe is... Hang on a minute, I think I may have played the wrong music. Okay, there we go. Anyway, Noe is our first Manakete for the game. Just as Gregor joined surprisingly late for a mercenary, Noe joined surprisingly early for a Manakete. Now, if you're familiar with earlier games in the series, you'll know how Manaketes work. If not, I pretty much explain most of the way they work when I explain Pan. Noe is basically the other shapeshifting class in this game, aside from Pan, and she works pretty much the same way, using Dragonstones like a weapon to transform into dragon form and do damage. But when the stone runs out, she's pretty much useless. However, less so in this game because she'll be able to reclass to other classes if that happens. Now, compared to Targwell, Manaketes are far more tank-oriented in terms of stats. They tend to have less skill and speed, but far more defense and strength, especially defense. And Noe can become one of the best tanks in the entire game, actually. With that +3 defense cap and the massive bonus that the Dragonstone gives her, yeah, she becomes pretty much unkillable to physical attacks eventually, and her resistance isn't half bad either. One other thing to note about Manaketes in this game is, as you've no doubt probably realised from me playing Chapter 8, but Manaketes actually have a ranged attack in this game. I don't know if they did in... I know they probably did in 3, I think, but this is the first time in a long time, let's just say, that Manaketes' breath has actually been long-ranged, and this actually does give them a definite niche over Targwell, and it's actually really useful. I mean, it lets you avoid counterattacks from Wormslayers, it lets you avoid counterattacks from a whole lot of things that you wouldn't want to get hit by, so, I mean, there are a few things that Noe doesn't want to get hit by, considering that she takes barely any damage from just about anything, but, Wormslayers are one of them, and having a ranged attack definitely helps in avoiding them. Of course, what you're probably staring at right now is her growth rates, which are kind of ridiculous. Yeah, if you haven't seen a Manakete in this series before, you'll know that in earlier games, to compensate for their uses being limited, basically, they had absolutely insane growth rates, and Noe is no exception. However, unlike them, she actually doesn't have limited usefulness, so... kind of insane there. Basically, Noe's HP is just downright ridiculous. It's one of the highest in the game at a 120% growth, meaning a pretty high 20% chance of gaining +2 to HP on level ups. Massively high strength without really sacrificing all that much in skill and speed, though her caps in those areas are fairly low, and, well, I'll talk about the other thing that makes them a bit of an issue later. Decent magic as well, even though magic doesn't really do anything for her as a dragon, she does have uses for that in other classes. Yeah, weirdly, Dragonstones give a +5 bonus to magic in this game, despite the fact that that does literally nothing when you're a dragon. That is just weird. I don't know why that's the case, but it just is. Very high luck, and mainly that insanely high defense. That's the best defense we've seen so far outside of Kellum, and combined with the +10 bonus from Dragonstones, yeah, defense is Noe's real asset, but a +2 resistance cap and a 50% resistance growth is great too. Now, those growth rates are very high, but the thing that balances them out is her base stats. Yeah, Noe's base stats are actually kind of low. They are slightly higher on Lunatic mode, but even then, the enemies are ridiculously overpowered there, so it's not like that really means much. The thing is, Noe starts with very low HP and very low speed. I mean really, really low speed. To the point where, despite her very high defense, she's going to get doubled by nearly everything, and with that low HP, she actually does die surprisingly quickly early on. She's kind of a Magikarp type character. You really need to get her leveled up a bit in order for her to be more useful, because those starting stats of hers, even with the Dragonstone bonuses, are actually very, very low. And it is actually quite a problem early on. Especially since she starts out at level 3 when, I mean, most of our characters should be about level 9 to 10 at this point, so... yeah, she starts out a little weak and will need a bit of baiting in order to level up, but once she does though, those really good growth rates are going to kick in and she's going to be pretty insane. Just one thing to note again about her base stats as well is her base resistance is fairly bad. And that will get better though with a 50% growth and a +2 cap there, but at the start she'll have trouble with magic. Later on, though, she doesn't suffer from the massive weakness to magic that most Targwell do, so she makes a pretty good tank from both sides of the spectrum. Just keep her away from Wormslayers. Like Pan, Wormslayers will deal effective damage to her no matter what class she's in, so that's always a problem. Speaking of classes, Noe, like Pan, is relatively limited as far as her classes go because Manakete takes up one of them, and well, it can't promote. But it doesn't exactly need to. It can reach a maximum level of 30 instead of 20, and it's pretty powerful as it is. I mean, ranged attack, massive bonuses, being virtually indestructible. It's a pretty awesome class, and I wouldn't really use her outside of it, mostly, if it weren't for the fact that her other class options are actually very, very good. She's one of the few characters who does very well in most of her class options. In fact, no matter what you make her, she actually tends to be pretty decent. But firstly, I'll talk about the skills that you gain from Manakete. As the counterpart to Targwell, it learns the Odd Rhythm skill, which increases hit and avoid by 20 on odd-numbered turns. Like Even Rhythm, this is a bit of a weird skill, but I guess it's alright, but at least it's giving you the bonus right from the start, but again, it's a pretty situational thing, but I guess it's kind of an appreciated bonus. Now, the second skill that Manakete's learn is Wormsbane, which is basically the equivalent of Beastbane for Targwell. Basically, it means that you deal effectiveness damage towards enemy dragon units while you're a Manakete, so it won't work in any of her other options. So if you reclass Noe, be sure to unequip this skill, because it's a waste of a skill slot if she's not a Manakete. Now, the problem with this skill, though, is it's nowhere near as useful as the Targwell equivalent. Why? Well, I mean, Beastbane works on Cavaliers, Paladins, Pegasus Knights, Falcon Knights, Griffin Riders. There's a lot of classes that works on, and they're actually quite common in the game. Aside from enemy Manaketes, which you will not be seeing in this game outside of Street Pass or DLC, the only thing that Wormsbane works on is Wyvern Riders and Wyvern Lords. And while they are kinda common and they are fairly tough classes, it's only one class branch, whereas Beastbane works on 3, so it's a little limited in its usefulness. I mean, effectiveness bonuses against Wyvern Riders is decent, but again, it's the only thing that it works on, so it's kind of a bit of a weird skill, and Manakete's definitely got the short end of the stick compared to Targwell there. Now, her other class options. She has the Mage class line, which is actually pretty interesting, because Noe actually is very, very good as a Mage. Weird as it might seem, as a mage, Noe's growth rates are basically a better version of Ricken's. She actually has better growth than Ricken in every single way. So, basically she functions the same way as he does. A mage who's also completely not squishy and thus can take hits very, very well. Even better in her case, since she'll have extra defense that she's gained from being a Manakete for so long and then reclassing, so she'll start off with a pretty high base defense for a mage, and her magic growth is still very good as a mage, as are her skill and speed. The problem is that her caps aren't exactly all that suited to being a magic user though. Ricken has a bit of an edge there, so he's still probably better as a pure mage goes. However, Noe does do one of her class options better than most magic users ever will, and that's Dark Knight. Aside from Virion, Noe is probably the best Dark Knight in the game. She's one of the only Dark Knights who actually have a very good growth in both strength and magic, plus she'll have fantastic defense in this class as well. So if you want a Dark Knight, Noe is actually one of the best available. You might want to take her through Mage first though. Reason being, in my first playthrough, I reclassed Noe directly to Dark Knight, and I kinda regretted it because, one, her magic was fairly low since she hadn't had 20 levels of being a mage to gain magic, but two, she started off with an E rank in magic, and that kinda meant she was stuck using very, very weak magic for a long time. Outside of forging, she'll be doing relatively pathetic damage early on as a Dark Knight if you reclass her there immediately, so best to build up the weapon rank first or have a few arm scrolls on hand. The skills that she gains from being a mage or Dark Knight are fairly useful. For the most part, they're pretty decent. I mean, Tome Fair is only really useful in magic classes, and Rally Magic is not so good because it's the only rally skill that she has. And Slow Burn is, well, still Slow Burn, but Life Taker definitely helps out her tanking ability quite a lot, so that's a pretty recommended skill. overall, yeah, I definitely recommend her as a Dark Knight. Her other class branch is the Wyvern Rider and Griffin Knight branch. That's kind of funny because Palm had that class branch too. As a Wyvern Rider, Noe will have ridiculous strength and ridiculous defense. Pretty much everything you'd expect from a Wyvern Rider, so she's very good in this class too. The main draw of going this class branch, though, is definitely a skill that she'll gain from Wyvern Lord, Swordbreaker. Now, remember how I said before that Lancebreaker was excellent for Pan because it would enable her to dodge Beast Killers more effectively because Beast Killers are Lancers? Well, this is the equivalent skill for Manaketes. The Wormslayer, an anti-dragon weapon, happens to be a sword, so having plus 50% accuracy and evasion against enemy sword users is a fantastic skill for Noe because, like I said before, she'll take effectiveness damage from Wormslayers no matter what class she's in, so highly recommended that you gain Swordbreaker for her because, yeah, definitely a useful skill. Unlike Palm, though, Noe will always pass this skill down to her children, so not skill, the class, so you don't have to worry about, you know, being an inheritable class or whatever, because don't know why that happened for Pan, but anyway. Griffin Knight does provide some pretty good skills too. Lancebreaker, not as vital as it is for Targwell, but another breaker skill is definitely appreciated. And Deliverer, I mean, I guess that's alright. I mean, the extra movement when paired up is nice considering that, well, considering how broken pair-up is in this game, you're pretty much going to be paired up at all times, so definitely helps in that regard. So, overall, Noe has some very good class options, and, I mean, she's a great tank as a Manakete, but she's fantastic as a mage as well, especially Dark Knight, and great as a Wyvern Rider, so definitely recommended that you train her. She's actually pretty good no matter what class that she's in. Again, though, you really want to pick up Swordbreaker because otherwise, watch out for those Wormslayers. And in Street Pass battles, beware the Book of Naga because that hurts dragons very, very, very badly. And Noe has no access to Tomebreaker, so yeah, she's probably going to get hit by it and that's going to hit very hard. But again, you don't need to worry about that unless you're doing Double Duel or Street Pass. Noe is voiced by Hunter Mackenzie Austin, who has only done a few roles in video games. The main thing that is most prominent that she's done is the voice of Shen Ko from Darkstalkers in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Now, slightly off topic, but I always thought Shen Ko's English name change was really weird. She already had a Chinese name in the Japanese version, and they changed it to a different Chinese name. I really don't know why they did that. She's also Porum in the DS version of Final Fantasy IV, but that's pretty much it as far as major game roles are concerned, though she has done a few things in anime as well.